Greetings and welcome to another Educator Innovator webinar. It's Tuesday, February 24th, and today we'll be talking with teachers from Pennsylvania who are modding and designing games as a way to understand how to build active, student-centered classrooms. I'm your host, Paul O. at the National Writing Project in Berkeley. Actually, today I'm hosting from my home in Oakland, but I do work in Berkeley. One of our Educator Innovator partners, the Institute of Play, has been working with educators through its TeacherQuest program to understand and utilize game design principles in the classroom, which in turn helps engage the young people they teach and provide them with the skills that they need for the modern age. So I personally am incredibly excited to be talking to members of Institute of Play and a teacher from Pennsylvania who's been implementing their professional learning TeacherQuest program. So today our guests are Faith Foster from the Highlands Middle School, Liza Dark from the Institute of Play, and Rebecca Rufo-Tepper, also from the Institute of Play. So let's let our guests introduce themselves. Let's see, from left, let's go from screen left. Faith.
I am Faith Foster. I am an emotional support teacher in the Highlands School District, which is located about 40 minutes outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And this position is new to me this year, although I have a lot of background with behaviors and students with special needs. So it's been a very hectic year doing some programming as well as trying to incorporate games and some of the things I learned over the summer.
Wonderful. Welcome, Faith. And let's turn next to Liza.
Unmute myself. Hi, I'm Liza Dark. I'm a game designer at the Institute of Play. So that basically means I not only design games, but I work collaboratively with teachers to design games and game-like curriculum that they'll implement in their classroom.
Fantastic. Thanks, Liza. And Rebecca.
Hi everyone, I'm Rebecca Rufo-Tepper. I'm from the Institute of Play and I'm the Director of Professional Development. And my background is I'm a former New York City public school teacher, and I joined the Institute when we founded a school in New York City called Quest to Learn, which puts game-based learning at the kind of heart of the curriculum and the design of the school. And my role with TeacherQuest is I'm kind of spearheading our efforts in terms of taking the learnings that we've discovered from working with teachers at Quest to Learn in New York City and developing a professional development program that can be used for teachers all over the country.
Wonderful. So before we dive into this really interesting topic, I just wanted to say to our audience, if you're watching this Hangout from the Educator Innovator blog, we encourage you to jump into the adjoining chat to talk with others who are watching, and also to post any questions you have. We'll bring those questions into the Hangout, and our guests will try to answer them. We'll also be posting links to resources in that chat throughout the webinar. So let's just start off by really thinking about games-based learning. A lot of teachers are using games in their classrooms. Why? What are the benefits of using games with students, would you say? And anyone, feel free to jump in.
I think there are a number of benefits. Working with the group of students that I'm working with this year, I see more social benefits and kind of character development happening than necessarily content related to specific academic areas.
Great. Anyone else? Would anyone else like to talk about this?
Yeah, I can add on a little bit to what Faith was saying. I mean, I think you know, the work that we've done is really based. You know, a lot of the work we do is based with teachers in schools, and so it's a very core critical need for teachers is to be able to reach standards such as like English and math, Common Core standards. But one of the things that games do really well that we found is like what Faith was mentioning. They support the development of other skills that we think are really critical for college and career in the 21st century. So they support the development of deep conceptual understanding and skills that can focus around math or science or social studies, but at the same time they can support students in the development of empathy and collaboration, strategic thinking, problem solving, all these other things that aren't necessarily are assessed on standardized tests, but are actually critically important.
And I should add, I'm a former elementary teacher, and we did a lot of gameplay with our young people. And I would just throw in there that there was incredible engagement, I think, when we played games, and B, I think what seems ever more apparent today is that kids have so many more kinds of games that they have exposure to. And this idea of being able to bring games into the classroom, to me, seems like it just leverages this natural interest, that young people have and that they bring to school, and an interest that isn't always capitalized upon, it seems to me, in classrooms. So I'm wondering what you all have seen as the impact of a games-based classroom, games-based learning on your students, and specifically your students, Faith, with special needs.
I see any time that I mention a game, whether it's something that we're creating or specific to a topic that we're working on, or it's just a board game or something that we've bought in the store, I see almost an immediate excitement and willingness to engage in the learning opportunity. And I think that is very important with the kids. Like you're saying, it's kind of a natural interest that they have. And again, I'm using gaming more so now as a framework for solving real-life problems, not so much focusing on a specific content area.
Great. Thanks, Faith. And actually, we already have our first question from the audience, from the chat. And I thought I'd throw it out there because I think it's, it fits well within this flow. Someone from the chat asked, can any of the guests give a game example of integrating Common Core standards that you've been using? Is that something that one of you would like to take up?
Sure, I can give an example of something. So one of the key areas we often find, particularly working with English language arts teachers, is real interest in designing games that fit into the Common Core standard around argumentation and reasoning. So we've developed several different types of games with teachers, and the Institute of Play, our role is really to facilitate, and I mean, Faith can speak to this as well as Liza, but just like, we don't actually design games for you. We help you learn how to design a game, and so in doing that, we play games, we modify games, and we support you in the development of your own games. So when I say we've designed games, what I mean is that we've supported teachers who've developed games. So one of the games that we have around a Common Core standard is about matching evidence to claims. So it's a Go Fish style game where students have evidence cards in their hand and claim cards in their hand, and they're trying to ask each other if they have the right evidence that fit those claims. And teachers have modified that game to be able to include analysis or justification pieces where they really build out an argument. And so the original game started with, it was a game about candy. So it was about arguing whether you felt like chocolate was better for you than raisins, or was, because dark chocolate has antioxidants, and so the kids would get to make this argument. And then the game would be modified to result in kids creating their own set of cards that they could use to build their own argument. So that's one example. I'm not sure if Liza or Faith, if you have others that you might want to talk about.
Go ahead, Faith.
I keep talking about my experiences, but one thing I haven't shared is that while I work with grades 6 through 8, I'm working with teachers in all content areas. So while I may not have a specific opportunity to build something or grow something independently, as we talk about collaboration, I have been working with some of the other teachers, and maybe not going through the entire process that I went through to learn how to create a game or modify a game, those kind of things, but just throwing out ideas and pulling things together. We're prepping for our PSSAs, our state standardized tests now, and I just started working with a teacher yesterday. Text-dependent analysis is something that's key to that test in the 6th grade, and so working with her to try to come up with some ideas of how to better engage the children so that they are focused and more engaged again with text-dependent analysis. So I don't have a concrete answer for you right now, but it's something that we're working on.
And Liza, were you going to jump in?
Oh, yeah. So one of the things that we do to support sort of this designer, everybody assuming this designer identity and everybody feeling like they can design games, both educators, sort of learning designers and game designers, is taking games that students and all of us are already familiar with and modifying them. It allows us to jump more easily into gameplay really quickly, and we can just modify the content. So one of these games that we found is really, really successful, along the same lines that Rebecca was talking about with argumentation and giving evidence, is Apples to Apples. So we have a bunch of different versions of Apples to Apples that we've used. Everything, there's a version of Apples to Apples called Peer to Shakespeare. There's one called Trait to Trait that's about character traits and analyzing those in different texts. So yeah, that's a really concrete example, and it's a really easy way to modify a game to use in your classroom because most people are familiar with it.
And so, am I correct in assuming that this notion of helping teachers see themselves as game designers, makes possible all kinds of work that could be turned into a game? I mean, in many respects, it's probably only limited by a teacher's imagination in terms of thinking about a piece of curriculum or a way in which to approach a particular topic, and then designing a game around that. Is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the main thing for us is that, the theme of today's session, talk is like learning by doing. And so for us, adults need to engage in learning by doing to support students in learning by doing. And playing and designing games is just a powerful vehicle for understanding that concept in a way that I don't know, it can be harder to tackle what that means. So like you can sit down and play a game and within few short minutes you can see adults start to enter that process and understand like, oh, this is actually a very good vehicle for learning. And so it's not that we believe that every single minute of class should be a game. We also believe you can borrow certain things from games, and you don't have to actually be playing a game to really bring learning by doing to your classroom. So even if you're not playing games all the time, the idea that learning by doing is part of what you do, for us, that's a powerful message that comes from game-based learning. And really great games, like it's not like you're explicitly, read this and say this and do this and write that down. It's really a discovery kind of inquiry, learning by doing process. And so teachers can take that wherever they want. It's super flexible, we feel like. And we've seen teachers create really long games that go over several weeks, and they're very full of simulations. And we've seen teachers kind of take a deck of cards and modify it in some way and just create a set of rules around it that creates a specific learning structure. And so for us, it's always critical if the teacher's very clear on what the learning is they want to happen within that space, and that they're able to say that this game is actually producing that type of learning. But yeah, it's very flexible, and the teachers, they should see themselves as designers. You can design a great learning game, but it doesn't mean it's going to fit every kid. And I'm sure, Faith, that you've seen this too. Like, some games just appeal to some kids more than others, and some teachers have if you work with different teachers, like that what works for one teacher won't necessarily work for the other. So we try to help teachers see themselves as designers, so they have some resources they can use, but they also feel very empowered to modify those based on their needs and their students' needs.
That's great. Thanks for that really helpful explanation, Rebecca. And that really, I think, addresses the next question that I had, which was the impact on teachers you work with. I'm wondering, alongside that, in case there's any more that any of you want to add in terms of the impact that you've seen on teachers, what kind of support and professional development do teachers need in order to use games? And would you like to jump in again, Rebecca, and start us off with that question?
Sure. I feel like I just talked a lot, so I was trying to you know, stop for a minute because I can talk forever. Yeah, no, so I mean, I think, you know, we also have a video that we can show, and it doesn't necessarily work great on Google Hangout, but we can share a link as well. Just about, it's a 2-minute video, which Faith and some of the other teachers that we worked with last summer we're in, that talks about the TeacherQuest program that we have. Certainly, we believe that the kind of professional development teachers need is it needs to feel really embedded into their job. It really needs to feel connected to their practice. It needs to feel like it's not generating extra work for work's sake. And specifically for game-based learning, it needs to bring teachers into a space where they feel like they are designers and that they feel empowered to understand the architecture of a game and be able to work within that to figure out how a game can support learning. So through the program that we run, we do a lot of work with just games where teachers, like, they play musical chairs, tic-tac-toe, like they do a lot of just fun games to think about the relationship between fun and challenge in a game. And then it's only until a couple days into the program do they really start dig into how a game can create learning and how that learning can be accessible and observable, and how you can bring that game into the classroom and create a whole set of experiences that surround it. So it's not just, the game isn't just like a 15-minute or 20-minute session. It's actually a set of things that happen before, a set of things that happen after, and the game is sort of this robust space. So for us, the professional development has to engage teachers in the design process, and moving through understanding games as tools for engagement, and then how do they also work to support learning.
Well, and I'm wondering, Faith, as a teacher who went through TeacherQuest, what did you learn from playing and designing games with other educators?
I think I learned how to stop and listen. And I thought it was very interesting to get different people's perspectives. So as you're sitting there and you may be evaluating or analyzing something that you did, or you're getting ready to build or test something that you created, you see those differences in perspective, because, you know, your brain thinks this is how I see it, but obviously multiple people will be playing something. So it's helpful to understand where other people are coming from. I think the biggest thing for me was being able to have fun with my peers. I think we're under so much pressure to focus on the content and the testing and all of those things that we forget that learning is fun. And obviously games are a great way to reinforce that with kids. In the midst of trying to get all of this content into them, I think the pressure sometimes allows us to forget why we're educators and the things that we want to accomplish with kids. And again, developing that love of learning, not just now, but for a lifetime in them. So I appreciated being able to reflect and do some of that with my peers as a reminder as why I'm a teacher.
That's fantastic. Liza, is there anything that you'd like to respond to in what Faith just said, or is there anything you'd like to add?
I mean, I think one of the things, as I was listening to Rebecca and Faith, that we do, so I think one of the biggest parts of our program that we really reinforce is this idea of playtesting. And this idea that it is such a crucial part of the design process, because that's what we really try and reinforce. Like, it's not just about building the game, it's about learning how to walk through that process. You know, it's not necessarily the product that they come out with at the end of it. And so playtesting is a huge part of that, because it really, as they said, it sort of opens your eyes to this new perspective, or not new, just, you know, it gives you the opportunity to see what you're doing through the lens of your students. And it sort of puts you in this position of the learner. So I think that that's something that I hear over and over and over again, is just this idea of playtesting, and then, you know, the youth that you're working with kind of become your co-collaborators in designing the game, which is a really, really empowering thing for them. And I think it's also, it's very, you know, important for the teacher as well.
And I'm wondering, Liza, if you could just perhaps give like a brief definition of playtesting. I think many people probably know what you mean, but some may not. So if you wouldn't mind just giving us the, you know, the brief definition.
Absolutely. So playtesting is basically when you go through the design process, which is you come up with an idea, you build a model of it to test so you can get feedback on it and make it better. So that testing period where you're putting your game, you're putting your experience or your product in front of other people who are not you to see how they use it, how they interact with it, what they do, where it might fail, and how you can change it later. That's playtesting. And for our purposes, we don't necessarily always mean we use playtests very loosely. Playtesting can be, getting feedback on a worksheet, getting feedback on an idea. It's really just the term that we use around getting feedback.
Great. This is a little bit tangential, but there's been some conversation that I've seen in social media among educators about this notion of failure, which I think sometimes, or this idea of failure connected to iteration, which I think is probably an element of playtesting. And I think on one side of the debate is this idea that failure is such a strong word, particularly for educators. It has such significance in the classroom. And I'm wondering how you reconcile, or if at all, this idea of iteration and trying something and possibly not succeeding and then moving on and iterating on that, which again I'm assuming is part of the playtesting model.
Yeah, so I think failure, so you mean specifically just the word failure and how that relates to playtesting?
Say it again, I'm sorry.
Sorry, do you mean sort of failure, the word failure and all of its implications and connotations, how it relates to playtesting?
Well, I guess I'm just curious, this idea of iterating, trying a thing, seeing that perhaps it doesn't work, then trying, the next version of that thing. It seems like this idea of trying and not succeeding is anathema to school. And so I guess so forget about the word failure. I suppose it's just this notion of iteration as allowing for something to not necessarily succeed, and that being okay. Like, is that problematic at all? For teachers who are engaging in this process?
I would say it takes I think once you actually put yourself in a place where you're playtesting and you're actually wanting not negative feedback, but you're wanting to see you're wanting people to offer you changes, right? I think something that's really important about games and people and educators and youth and just everybody who wants to design games, because everybody can. That's so powerful about it is that it presents a system, and it sort of it allows you to think of your own world as a system. And when you do that, you can start to see how all of those components work together, and then you start to think about, well, what if I just changed one of those things? And what if I made it a little bit different? How would that impact the greater system? So it has this way of empowering you to see your world as a system that you can change. So I think that in terms of like how you would reconcile those two things, it takes a little while, but not too long, because you start to see the value of it immediately. Like the return on investment is like it takes 5 seconds.
Awesome, thanks. And just throwing this back to Faith for a moment, I'm wondering what did you learn from bringing games into your classroom? What do you continue to learn from bringing games into your classroom? I think you've begun to touch on this, but is there anything that you'd like to add?
I think again, I think sometimes kind of repeat what I said before, that as educators we're so caught up in the process and the Common Core and this and what's the next thing coming, and oh Lord, the PSAs are going to be here in the next 4 weeks, so what do we need to cram into them? And I think this, the gaming process, whether we're creating it, we're having the kids create it, we're exploding things or modifying things, that I think that it really allows us to look at the learner learn more about the learner, the style of learning. I think, there's a lot of pressure to differentiate with inclusion and things like that, and I think it offers an opportunity to evaluate strengths and challenges within that process, and create a rapport and a relationship, because learning really happens with that relationship, and I see gaming as a way to facilitate that.
Great. And I wanted to turn back to Rebecca for a moment. Rebecca, you brought up and reminded us that this conversation is really focused on this notion of learning by doing, and I'm a huge advocate of that philosophy. But I can hear in my head, teachers who I've been in conversation with who might say, for instance, how do I find time for something like that? Or learning by doing, I have this responsibility to teach these, abstract concepts that, perhaps require some other way of engaging with, the material. I don't know if you hear those same kinds of conversations, but I'm wondering, how would you respond to that, particularly at the secondary level, this notion of learning by doing?
Yeah, no, that's a very common sentiment, and people who are new to sort of the ideas of game-based learning or related, like project-based learning or inquiry-based learning, the immediate feeling people often have is, this is time-consuming and it's much faster for me to do more direct instruction. And the thing about it is, like, do you want kids to learn things that last, or is it just filling up a vessel that hopefully something sticks and they'll pass the test? And so for us, we understand. I mean, we work in public schools. I was a former teacher. Like, I understand. Like, there's a huge, immense pressure, and sometimes it's very tempting to just say, okay, we're learning this today, and I'm going to talk for 30 minutes, and you're going to write these notes, and then let's just pretend that you learned that. And some kids can. Like, I was never that kid. I know people, though, who take the notes, and they somehow remember it, and they can do great. But the reality is that we have this country has a very large dropout rate in urban areas. We're not serving all of our students, and there is no reason why learning should have to be painful for kids. It doesn't make sense. No one ever decreed that that's the way it needed to be. So we like to say, it's not that you necessarily are going to be playing games with your students all the time, but if you can open up your mind to understand, and you can experience it yourself, that, oh, instead of reading that, I played this game where I read that and then I played this game. And that game had me take things that I read about and use it, and now it stays with me. And so forever I will kind of keep that with me. I'm sure everybody can remember the most powerful learning moments they had as a kid. Very few people will tell you, when I was in middle school, I remembered this great lecture. They'll say, for me, it's always like when I had to do a mock trial. So that there was something about that was very game-like for me, and it really resonated with me as a learner. So, I think that we want teachers to kind of move their practice, but we know that it doesn't necessarily, it's not like jumping off a cliff. We understand that, like, you're not going to turn your room upside down and change everything all at once, but for us it's about making that movement, that gradual movement towards understanding that the learning by doing piece is actually really, really important. And if you don't integrate that into your practice, you're kind of missing a lot of learners. And even the students that can learn in other ways, it's just as valuable for them, because they're going to explore things and think really deeply. Well-designed games really do that, or game-like experiences. So, so I would just try to tell that to teachers, like, play it yourself, what's happening to you, and you can start to see how that impacts you and how there's that space for you as a learner. And also, the engagement piece is huge. We don't think engagement is the end. Like, it's not just to engage kids, but if you can engage students in learning, then it makes your job as a teacher so much easier. You don't have to argue about paying attention, because they'll pay attention because of the intrinsic value of what they're doing to them. So that's usually where we start when we talk about that kind of thing with educators, and it's a really common thing, and we've seen that through our program. Like, there's a lot of people who say, I want to be doing more of this, but it's really hard to find time. And part of what that means sometimes to me is they also feel like it's hard to find time because of the mandates that are put on them by their administrations at their schools and the systems they have set up in their schools for what they're supposed to be doing. So that's kind of a huge piece of the puzzle. I mean, it's not just what a teacher wants to do, it's what the school enables that teacher to do.
May I add something to that?
Of course, please do.
Just listening to you talk, I could shake my head vigorously at so many things that you said, and understanding that time being the biggest issue. And as I kind of talked to other teachers about ways to differentiate the types of lessons that are doing, or the kind of learning that kids are doing, one of the challenges we're finding as a district, and we're a suburban district with a very urban population, extremely high levels of poverty, and one of the things we're seeing as we meet as a collective whole is the carryover is lacking. So, you know, you're teaching something in second grade, and then, oh goodness, you got to do it again in third, and then fourth and fifth, and et cetera. And so something that we're exploring is why our test scores are the way they are. What is missing with that carryover? Are we taking learning styles into consideration? And then again, engagement, I think, obviously is the biggest piece. And so a lot of what you're saying, I'm living on the day-to-day. And so whether that's teacher opinion and time, or the challenge of getting our kids engaged and interested in learning.
And I want to follow up, Faith, and ask you how this kind of experiential learning for yourself in your own, professional learning as a practitioner, how has this affected your growth as a teacher, would you say?
I've always, when we first got the flyer that we could attend this information session to attend TeacherQuest and learn more about it and participate in it. I've always believed in games and always used them. I've always, at times, I've gotten that look like, oh, you're using Scrabble in your classroom or something like that. People really missing the value of using something like that. One, the learning process that takes place, but again, all those external factors with social skills, etc. And I think this has just really enhanced my thinking about things. On the day-to-day, I work with people who, some are very creative and innovative, and again, that engagement piece, or engaging students, and others have a more archaic form of lecture and writing as their learning process. And so I see a frustration, I see an excitement for myself, but feel very driven to evaluate or reflect on the way I'm teaching and the way I'm delivering things, but very driven to work with my peers to help them understand that there's another way and maybe what kids need.
Yeah, that's great. And I have my own personal sort of anecdote that I just wanted to add, which is in our organization, the National Writing Project, we have done some work around hacking, essentially, hacking games. And one thing that I found, for instance, when teachers have had this chance to hack a game, particularly a game that's really familiar to them, is they have this sense of agency that feels really empowering to them. And I think it makes them realize the extent to which they can or cannot or do not provide that sense of agency to their young people. It's a really interesting moment, and I wonder if this. I mean, we've been talking about designing games, but this idea of being able to mod games, or the ability to design games, it also leads to the sense of empowerment for Quest to Learn. For TeacherQuest educators who are participating in the program. This notion that particularly in this sort of standards-based, often scripted curricula environment that teachers find themselves, this idea that they have this ability to shape a path, because they have the ability to either create a game or mod a game, whether that's something that rises to the surface at all in your experiences as an important aspect of this work. I guess I'm just throwing that out. I don't even know if it's a question really to any of you.
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure it's empowerment is key here. If you're going to people need to feel ownership over what they're creating, and they need to feel like they are they have choices and they have options, and they're able to create something that is theirs. And so whether that's a piece of writing or some kind of project they're doing or a game. I mean, that's critical. And I think for us, because the design process is so core to the work, that the agency is kind of central to all of it. It's like you choose, and you test your game, like Liza was talking about play testing, and you get feedback, and you think about how that feedback can inform your design, and you try not to be married to your ideas, and you try to improve it. But ultimately, you created something that you're bringing into your classroom, and you're sharing with others, and that can be something, it can make you feel really great to say, oh, I made that, and that I created that from myself. It's very empowering, I think, and for kids too. It's trying to make things feel so elusive. I mean, the TeacherQuest program that we've been running in Pittsburgh is we've been looking at sort of the fundamentals of games and game-based learning, and we don't use digital tools and technology, but it's about like not thinking things are mysterious. It's like you can think about that with a computer as well. Like, ooh, what's it doing? That's so cool. Like, it's magic. Trying to demystify that stuff and say, like, actually, you can learn how to do that. You can understand how to use these kinds of tools or create them, and it's not to remove magic, because it's there, so you could feel that excitement, but to say, it's not beyond you to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think there's something really, really empowering about asking yourself really simple questions. There's a part of the game design process where you're testing these assumptions, and you're sort of forced to break down what you're observing into these questions. So you kind of have this ability to remove the complexity. So, for instance, if you have a bunch of items in front of you that you need to design a game around for fun, let's say, and you're looking at all of these different objects like a phone or a pen, and you're looking at what they can do. So in some ways, I think it's really empowering, because you just have this new perspective, this new lens of how to approach the world almost.
I love that. I love that idea. So I'm wondering, turning back to you, Faith, what are some of the challenges? Again, you've named some of them, but in particular with your students, what are some of the challenges that you've faced in doing what you've learned through TeacherQuest with your students, or at least the young people you work with?
I think initially is just the confidence level that they have to participate in something. And various parts of the process and different things that we do with them. I think the other challenge is differentiating. On any given day, I can work with children who have, I have a group of children that have intellectual disabilities all the way through gifted. And so looking at how to reach them with whatever the topic may be, in a way that kind of addresses and empowers everyone to be a contributing member. And I think we always have to keep that in mind. How is everyone contributing so that they are feeling empowered or productive in the process? So I think really it's just the difference in people.
Great. Sorry to interrupt. I was just wondering, when you say confidence or confidence level, what is challenging their confidence, do you think? Or what are they not feeling confident about?
I think approaching something new or something that they may not be comfortable with, depending on the challenge of the process itself or the game or the outcome. I think that many kids, especially the population of kids that I work with the special needs, aren't always confident in their abilities, whether it's academic or social. In their ability to maintain relationships or build relationships in the context of sitting and doing something for 5 minutes or sitting and doing something for an hour, and then the stress of the requirements of what they're doing.
And is there also any kind of issue that you find among young people because they're not used to, say, playing games in school? Like, is that concept, so sort of foreign to them in terms of their learning history that in schools that's just like a weird thing for them?
I don't think they think it's weird in the context that I'm working with them, but again, if you were to go into a social studies class or a math class. I think that they'd be like, they get very excited when you play a game even once in 9 weeks. Having been a learning support teacher in language arts and algebra class, anytime you said you're going to play a game, they just were beside themselves and so excited because it isn't something that they're used to. And I think, math, when we talk about abstract concepts or concrete thinking and those kind of things, I think math is a very difficult place, whether it's this logical space that the teacher's in, as far as the way that they think, or their physical space, in trying to create games in that context is difficult. Actually, I had a conversation with a teacher about it today. She finds it very difficult to do project-based learning or games in her math class.
That's fascinating, and yeah, I mean, I'm sure we could go on about why that teacher is finding it difficult. And actually, if you want to share any more about that, you should feel free. We also have a question from the chat that I'd love to pose to the three of you. Do you have any more that you'd like to add about that, Faith? Okay. So here's a question. So instead of physical games, with the advent of bringing your own devices, what is your feeling? What are your feelings about using games on devices, and how would you approach that? And I throw that open to any of you.
I think go ahead. I think games on devices are a great idea, and I think the challenge that we face using devices in school is maintaining the structure and boundaries that need to be in place, not so much using those things, it's the actual device and how to maintain the structure. But I think actually using devices and games on them is a great idea.
And Rebecca, were you going to add something to that?
Yeah, no, I was just saying that the program that we've been running in Pittsburgh is really focused on the use of non-digital games, but for us, digital games are a fantastic tool as well, and having kids do this on their own devices can totally work. It's just for us, we want to make sure that teachers are using those in the right ways in terms of creating long-term learning experiences for kids and allowing them ways to show what they know. And, we believe that sort of human interaction piece is actually critical in understanding like when to put your device away and when we're going to just kind of work on something together without technology and when we're going to use technology, because we live in a culture where kids get tons of screen time. So it's not that those things aren't fantastic learning tools, it's just about knowing when to deploy them and when to not, and having kids understand that relationship as well. But there are some really great games that that kids can play on tablets and other devices that can support all kinds of learning, and it's not just, again, those traditional content areas, but also supporting students in 21st century skill development. So, we definitely think that's in itself, those things are not bad. They can actually be really good, but like any tool, they have to be used thoughtfully by instructors, and you don't it's just like you don't just put kids on devices and say, okay, now you're gonna play this for 20 minutes, or like, oh, it's a reward, you finished that, now you can use the computer, or now you can use your device. Like, there are some bad practices that have been developed around technology. I think I experienced them myself as a parent, but also with educators. And so one of the things the Institute of Play tries to do is work with educators around how do you use those things thoughtfully and meaningfully to support student learning. And understanding how non-digital games work is actually one of the pieces that can help you understand how to use digital games well.
And do you also focus at all on the development of digital games? In other words, using tools like, say, for instance, Scratch or other tools that, because I go back to what you had said earlier, Rebecca, about this notion of giving kids, giving young people, giving teachers themselves this understanding of how games operate, so that it's not necessarily magic, or that the magic is, say, the magic of a wizard game, the magic that you actually want the game to have, versus the magic of how does that game actually operate or function. So do you all use tools like, say, for instance, or utilize tools like Scratch or game building tools as well?
We do, we do. We use, so it sort of depends, like Rebecca said, it depends on what the goal is, what the learning goal is, and sort of what the class is. So we have a class called Sports for the Mind at Quest, for example, which is a digital media arts class. And so they have a whole series of units around Scratch. But that's sort of focused on using Scratch as a tool for self-expression. And then, we use a lot of sandbox type games like Minecraft and a few others that also act as these really, really compelling tools where students are building inside of them. And I think that we've really found the highest rate of success in terms of teachers feeling like it's a really meaningful digital tool and students feeling like they're getting a lot out of it from these types of games where they're building inside of them.
Great, thanks. So I'm wondering, what are some opportunities that you see in the future? And I'll turn this over to Faith. What are some ways that you believe this work will provide opportunities in the future?
For schools or students or both?
I think for you in particular, and the population you work with and your colleagues.
I see a tremendous need within the building that I work in to take a look at learning differently and engagement. So for the future, I see an opportunity to help others start to explore this as an option. I think this type of professional development would be extremely helpful. And sometimes I think you have to start small. I can envision people, the quote-unquote buy-in that everyone needs to have. And so I think that kind of have to start small and grow from there. I think they'd be very overwhelmed if they went through the process that I did back in the summer. But I see a need for it. As far as growth for students, again, I think engagement, we talked about that, is so very important in developing their level of learning and recognizing their ability to be successful. And just as a professional, I think that my goal when I go to work every day is to impact the life of a student and make something better for them. And so I think anything that, any way that this has helped me to grow or helps me to help others grow, impacts the lives of the students that we serve.
Thanks. And I just want to throw in that it seems to me, and this is going back to something that Liza had talked about earlier, this notion of the systems thinking that is a part of the game. That was not something that was part of my own education, this idea of being able to understand systems. And it seems to me that, and maybe this is overblown or overstating it, but it seems to me to be able to give young people that opportunity to understand the systems that are operating all around us, the political systems in particular, the educational system within which they find themselves, seems to me preparing young people to be engaged, civic, knowledgeable actors. Excuse me, as adults, which is exactly what I would argue we would want our young people to be. So I see that as a particular opportunity as well, just to tack on to all the possibilities that you mentioned. And once again, that was not a question. I apologize. I should be asking questions here. But I did want to give you each an opportunity because we are getting close to the end of the hour. Excuse me, and I apologize for my cough, which I've been able to suppress up until now. But I have, here in the Bay Area, I shouldn't complain because the weather's beautiful, but there has been this persistent cough that we've all been experiencing. But I did want to give you an opportunity to have some final thoughts, and I'm wondering as well when we get to you, Rebecca, so again we'll start with Faith, but when we get to you, Rebecca, too, if not only could you add final thoughts, but if there are people who are interested in learning more about TeacherQuest, how might they find out more information about TeacherQuest? I think if you could help our audience with that question as well. But Faith, any final thoughts?
I feel like a lot of the things I've said have really dealt with that relationship piece or that engagement, and I don't want to underemphasize all of the pieces, like you're saying, the systems and the learning that takes place, and as we throw out Common Core and how that comes into play. But I think we first have to engage our students, and that's in my line of work currently, and in what I'm experiencing and my professional peers are experiencing. That's where we're missing a lot of kids, and so I think my focus at this point is on that, so that we can get to those more in-depth or critical thinking pieces of what's possible with this.
Wonderful, thanks. Liza, any final thoughts?
Yes, actually. I guess my final thought, and something I've been thinking about a lot recently as we've been going through the different TeacherQuest programs, is Rebecca mentioned earlier, and I don't think that we explained it at length, but this idea of games versus game-based versus game-like learning, which is a term that we use a lot, which I think, so when we talk about game-like learning, we talk about it more as taking those different parts of the game, like you have a goal, you have a series of obstacles that are put in front of you to get to that goal, you have roles that you're taking on, you basically have a problem space that you're put into. And then you're given those tools to be able to solve it. That experience doesn't necessarily have to be a formal game. Rebecca also mentioned a mock trial earlier when she was discussing game-like learning. So I think, you know, as we work with so many different teachers, that it's, I guess in getting to that point where you start to feel comfortable implementing games in the classroom, it's like keeping this idea in mind of developing things that are game-like could be sort of like a good scaffolding step upward, and a really good way to put it in your classroom and to integrate it into your practice without necessarily, you know, having to use a game if that makes you feel uncomfortable for a variety of reasons. Or if you just want to try something that sort of changes the overarching ecology of your class.
Wonderful, thank you. And let's turn now to Rebecca for a final thought.
Sure. Thoughts. Yep. So, like Liza said, learning by doing is one of the 7 game-like principles that the Institute of Play established. And so if you go on our website, the Institute of Play has a number of free resources for educators, one of which is a video series around the 7 game-like learning principles, and we have a whole video around game-like learning. And you can learn about how you can integrate that into your practice, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a game. So you can think about, how can I have kids, you know, next time you're thinking about something that's difficult to teach, you know, just think about what opportunities do you have to have kids learn that by doing and not just by listening. Right, how can they do that? And so games, again, powerful vehicles for that, but you can also use something that's really more game-like. So if you're interested in this program and learning more, we're going to be doing 2 more webinars, and so those with Educator, Innovator will be coming up in the next couple months, so I would suggest checking those out. I would check out the Institute of Play website. I know some resources have been shared with you as we've been talking. And then I would also say, like, if you're in the Pittsburgh area and you're part of the Allegheny Intermediate Unit, we're hopefully going to be doing another program this summer, and people like Faith will be back as mentors. So keep your eye out in April for those materials to be released to the Institute of Play and the AIU, and if you're a teacher in the area, you should apply. And if you're not a teacher in the area and you're still interested, the Institute of Play, you could email PD, the letter PD, at like professional development at instituteofplay.org, and you can also just fill out an info form on our website. And let us know what you're interested in if you want to bring TeacherQuest to your school. We also have a whole space on our website for TeacherQuest. And so you can do something that's a day. Faith did an intensive week and then a follow-up program that she's been engaged with since July. So she's like a hardcore participant. But for people who just want to get their feet wet, there's ways of just doing something that's a day, just to learn a little bit more, and there's information on our website.
Great, thanks, Rebecca. And before I thank all of you, I'll just add that at Educator Innovator, we're also publishing a series of posts from the called the TeacherQuest case files. We're reposting some blog posts from the Institute of Play, and in fact, we just published one today that features Bill Wilson, who we had hoped would be on this webinar, but he had a medical emergency, so he couldn't join us. So we hope that Bill is feeling better. And I just wanted to thank the three of you. I feel like the work that you described, the work that you're engaged in, is really at the vanguard of just reimagining learning and reimagining what a classroom experience can be like. So appreciate all your thoughts, and thank you very much. I wanted to say to our audience that if you would like to, if you'd like to learn more about connected learning, which is a set of design and learning principles that undergird much of the work of our, undergirds the work here at Educator Innovator, and undergirds the work of much of the work of our partners like the Institute of Play. Be sure to check out the Connected Learning Alliance site at clalliance.org, where there are great testimonials from practitioners and informative multimedia pieces. And if you'd like to keep abreast of future opportunities from Educator Innovator, please sign up for our monthly newsletter. Scroll down to the bottom of the homepage at educatorinnovator.org, and follow Educator Innovator on Twitter at @innovates_ed. Thanks, everyone, and have a good night.